let's get straight to the point. I don't like wasting time, and this video is going to be quite long, so here's how this is going to work. I'm going to tell you what the theory is up front, without worrying about compiling any evidence, and after I do that, I'll spend the whole rest of the video going over all of the evidence and how I reached that conclusion. Otherwise, you just think I'm some kind of crazy person and you won't know where I'm going with this. This video aims to answer one big question that has haunted the community for years now, and there's still so much controversy about it. Who is Mike? I have the answers, so allow me to explain everything.
Disclaimer, I don't actually have the answers. This is a theory, I'm just having fun here. So if you disagree, that's fine, but at least hear me out, because I may be right.
Mike is device_friend, the demon cat with a pointed tail of hell that must not be followed. As the file name device friend suggests, Mike is always at the humble service of whoever summons him, offering assistance that always comes with a price. Mike was the one who first helped SPAMTON rise to fame, and together they made a deal. In exchange for becoming a big shot, SPAMTON would sacrifice his relationships, losing all of his personal connections in the process. He didn't need anyone else. Eventually, SPAMTON met TENNA and the two became partners. SPAMTON then decided to share his secret, telling TENNA about Mike and how he rose to fame. But the moment SPAMTON formed that connection, that relationship, his deal with Mike was broken and he lost everything. After that, SPAMTON bailed, leaving TENNA desperate to track down this mysterious Mike he'd heard so much about. TENNA harasses goons so relentlessly that they eventually just started pretending to be Mike to keep him satisfied, and it worked. This means the Mike TENNA constantly talks to throughout Chapter 3 isn't the real one at all, but the fake Mikes we encountered later in Chapter 4. The name Mike may seem a bit random for this weird cat demon entity idea I'm pitching right now, but I think it actually comes from etiquette, or Japanese bobtail, a rare cat breed said to bring you good luck, which fits perfectly in this context. And I think we all know that Toby is really big into Japanese, so he would 100% make that kind of pun for a character name. Or not. I don't know, Toby Fox. As the quote-unquote tail of hell, Mike also led KRIS and Des to the shelter, possibly in an attempt to help someone else. Maybe Gaster, but that's not important right now. And in doing so, became directly responsible for Des's disappearance. They followed the pointed tail into the shelter, where the forest would grow, and Mike took Des away. KRIS witnessed the entire thing happen, but as a coping mechanism, when trying to describe what they saw, they repressed the memory, hiding it behind the tree to avoid thinking about what happened. There was a man behind the tree, KRIS said. But that's not right. There is no man. And there never was. Whew, okay, that's a lot of words I just threw at you without any evidence. So now it's time to actually go over why I think any of that makes sense. And to start, let's quickly go over what we know about device_friend. Okay, let's make this quick. If you're watching this video, you maybe know who Friend is, but just in case you don't, Device_Friend is this big old grin with pink and yellow eyes that appears several times across the game. Its first appearance was in the basement of Queen's mansion. That was the first ever instance we got of Friend in Deltarune. Friend was also meant to appear in an unused Birdly attack where his face would show up on a barricade based on random RNG chance. This next one is important because it happens in a mandatory cutscene. Friend appears in the Chapter 3 intro cutscene, but appears very similar to Endogony from Undertale. An enemy that, when checked, displays the text, "It's unclear how many dogs this is." I don't know what to make of this, other than maybe further cementing how Friend is a being of uncertainty and random chance. The reason I mentioned this being in a mandatory cutscene is because if something is being introduced to the player in a cutscene that cannot be skipped, it means it's probably important, you know, Chekhov's gun and all that. Friend also appears in several places in the sword route boards, his eyes and mouth appearing in the darkness in these two locations. During the Shadow Mantle battle, lots of little friends with cat heads are summoned to attack you and have a random RNG chance to drop a heal item for you when they die. In the SPAMTON sweepstakes, Friend's eyes can be seen by random chance in the chair page when you click on the chair, playing a laugh sound effect and resetting the page. He also does the same thing in the rare cats page when you click on a cat and there's a random chance that Friend will jump scare you again. Friend is also part of the device files, implying he's related to, or at least acknowledged by Gaster as a friendly entity. Friend also appears in the Batat minigame connecting Friend to cat PETTERZ. But we'll come back to that and what it means later, because it's a whole thing. In cat PETTERZ, as described by Noelle in her blogs, the cats are made of circles as part of the game's art style, and you can get different cats at random as they hatch from eggs. I mention this because, in the prophecy, a certain tail of hell is mentioned, shown to be made of circles. An unused graphic also shows the tail having an arrow at the end, making it look like a demon's tail. A pointed tail, if you will. And I mention that because near the egg room in Chapter 4, we come across this organic that says,
"Something in between. There was something in between. It was mixed up. Lost where the forest would grow, the children followed the pointed tail. The poor children.
The same line is further connected to the egg room in the SPAMTON sweepstakes, where the same line is repeated on the page where the tree appears. This connects Friend to the eggs and the forgotten man somehow. But again, I'll elaborate on that later. Noelle's blog mentions that when playing cat PETTERZ, she once got a white egg with the word special in it. She took care of that egg because it was taking a while to hatch, so it eventually disappeared, the game displaying that it left due to happiness. It's unclear whether this connects to Friend or not, but it felt worth mentioning, as it's related to the eggs and cat PETTERZ, both of which Friend is connected to, as we established. And one more thing that I'll address a little more later. In the sword route, when KRIS lacks a controller to play the original Mantle minigame, a pink and yellow controller is left outside the door, and we know for a fact that Ram didn't put that there because he was keeping an eye out for TENNA the whole time. I stuttered a little bit, but that's fine. Due to how much Friend appears in the sword route, assuming that Friend put the controller there is not that big a reach, especially when you consider the colors. Adding to that, the vending machine outside the room can smile at you with the flavor text,
Always at your humble service,
being displayed. Now, I know for a fact this is some Friend bullshit, but unfortunately I can't prove that. That, to my knowledge, is what we know about Friend so far, that we can be sure of. So now, let's finally talk about the insane rabbit hole that is Our first mention of Mike is when you ask SPAMTON about friends in his shop.
Me? Friends? Ah, KRIS, you and me are already... We don't need anyone else. We don't need... We don't need any... We don't need Mike. Mike.
After the mention of Mike, SPAMTON immediately calls out TENNA, calling him a criminal. SPAMTON has a tendency to push people away and dismiss them when they wrong him. The very first instance of that we see is him saying, we don't need easels or CRTs. The easel is Swatch, and the CRT is TENNA. About Swatch, they knew each other back in Queen's Mansion when SPAMTON was still a big shot, but then SPAMTON was evicted when his sales dropped. Even after that, SPAMTON kept trying to sneak back into the Queen's Mansion disguised as Swatch, presumably to take the Neo robot, but kept being kicked out, and it's clear he still holds a grudge.
To think he once pretended to...
Be my friend now!
There to...
all he wasn't was shoulder to cry on,
But in the end, he only...
all he wasn't was smoking hot ass now.
We also see another good example when he calls TENNA a criminal, or when he talks about game show hosts screwing you over right at the good part. SPAMTON and TENNA were partners at one point. They even had plans of starring in a collaboration together. Don't even get me started on Jevil. As soon as SPAMTON falls out with someone, his first instinct is to push them away and say horrible things about them. Following this pattern, SPAMTON clearly saying, we don't need Mike, could imply that they were once associates, or, well, friends. This comes up in the first place because you ask him about friends. It doesn't get clearer than that. Speaking of this friends connection, there's also this line.
Friends!
KRIS, what are you talking about? You don't need...
Friends!
I can make my hands into phones!
You don't need friends. You don't need Mike. Mike equals friend. Okay, I'm half joking here, but seriously. Analyzing this even further, after talking about friends here, SPAMTON immediately talks about making his hands into phones. We know he had an associate he talked to on the phone that is the reason behind his success. Another instance of SPAMTON turning on a previous associate by saying he doesn't need them anymore. He can make his own phones or whatever. This dialogue alone ties friend, Mike, and the person SPAMTON was talking to on the phone together. Once you realize they're all the same person, this line makes complete sense. The other mention of Mike we have from SPAMTON is after you defeat him with violence in his Neo battle.
Are you getting all this?
Mike.
I'm finally gonna be a big shot!
Something about the way he calls Mike here feels provocative, as if he's saying like, hear that Mike? I don't need your help. Even if he's in denial, SPAMTON clearly holds some sort of attachment to Mike, as seen in Damn You TENNA. He says everyone's gonna pay for what happened to him, except Mike. SPAMTON thinks Mike is innocent to an extent, and that whatever happened is TENNA's fault entirely. Also, I don't know how to tie this into the theory yet, but the way the black text blends into the background here is very reminiscent of how ERAM hides text and darkness in the sword route. When asked about Mike in the SPAMTON Q&A from the sweepstakes, SPAMTON gets defensive, immediately assuming that TENNA's out to get him, claiming TENNA's crew knows nothing about Mike and he plans to keep it that way. This is confirmed in Chapter 4 when TENNA's crew are revealed to have never even met Mike, instead pretending to be him just to keep TENNA from harassing them. Then there's Mike's room. And this is where the connections to friends start to get even clearer. Mike's room has a cat with different colored eyes on the door, and is otherwise filled with cats and pink gold imagery. The password to Mike's room is 6453, which is how you spell Mike using the digits of an old cell phone keypad. This connects Mike to phones. Another interesting connection, going off of the assumption that friend is a humble servant to whoever summons him, it makes an interesting parallel to the dynamic between the fake Mikes and TENNA. At first, one would think that fake Mike would only help with the show behind the scenes, but small Mike says that he's the one that takes care of a bunch of unrelated routines for TENNA, like reading him bedtime stories, doing his therapy, things like that. Mike's role as a servant doesn't end at just the TV show, but everything. Always at your humble service. This is what makes me think friend as a demon serves whoever summons him without picking sides. Even when he's summoned to attack you during the Shadow Mantle battle, he drops healing items for you. He's helping you as well. After fighting the Mikes, the whole room turns into cat petters, and boy, there is a lot about cat petters, so let's tackle that now. Cat petters is mentioned a lot throughout Deltarune as a game about cats, and it's described as a game where you hatch cats from eggs, take care of them, and I guess play a bunch of mini games. Like, basically every pet simulator out there. This is almost certainly a reference to a real game that exists called Cats with a Z, even down to the art style being made out of circles to evoke like that fake 3D sort of look, and the mechanic of petting cats with your mouse. Anyway, back to the point I was making. The Mike room turns into cat petters after you fight the Mike trio, down to the exact mini-games Noelle had described in her blogs. She calls out Jongler by name, she describes Batat, naming every cat that shows up and how rare they are, calling out one of Friend's appearances directly as a cat that lowered the amount of points she had. Friend does make an appearance in the Batat minigame. If you catch him, he can give or take away points through random RNG chance, that chance being between minus 50,000 and plus 300,000. He can give you an absurd amount of points, but he also breaks your fuel in the game. It's luck with a cost, like a deal with the devil sort of way. There is a third minigame that seems to go unmentioned here though, and that's Pluie. The Pluie minigame consists of you having to carry cats from one house to another while it's raining without letting them get wet. Well, if you pay attention, the page does reference Pluie too. Ever wonder why the blog page that explains the minigames is called Rain? Well, need I remind you, the end of the page also talks about Catty heading over to Noelle's house when it was raining. A cat walking between two houses during the rain. But where am I going with this, I hear you asking? Well, the house in the Pluie minigame is called SPR Mike Shelter. Like the shelter that the Shadow Mantle fight takes place in. The one where Friend shows up at. Okay, taking a step back for a moment. If you think about it, this entire room could literally be the TV World version of the PETTERZ RPG cartridge under KRIS's bed. If you inspect that, it says it has the name of Catty and Catty faintly written in gel pen. And during the Mike fight, there is flavor text that says smells like dry gel pen. To add to that, in Noelle's blog, she also says that those minigames she described make a cameo in PETTERZ RPG. That information had no reason to be added, but it makes a lot of sense in the context that the Mike room is a Dark World manifestation of that cartridge, hence the specific smell of dry gel pens. Anyway, I think I've spoken enough about PETTERZ. Let's talk about Mike's relationship with TENNA, or lack thereof, is where things start getting interesting. Back when KRIS and Noelle were kids, they brought the library laptop, aka Queen in the cyberworld, home, allowing TENNA and SPAMTON to meet. SPAMTON offered to teach TENNA how to use technology, and they soon became partners. After some sweet talk, TENNA convinced SPAMTON to tell him what his secret was. The secret to being a big shot. The person who was talking on the phone that suddenly made SPAMTON's sales skyrocket. TENNA likely heard the name Mike for the first time during this exchange. When they were going to sign the deal, SPAMTON took a phone call, went pale, and ran away. TENNA didn't hear anyone on the other side, and he never saw SPAMTON again. This is the exact moment Mike disappeared and SPAMTON stopped being a big shot. Now at first, I thought maybe Mike left because SPAMTON got greedy and tried to sell him out, but looking again, this is the only selfless act SPAMTON has ever done. Because of Friend's ties to demons and hell, maybe this could be a deal with the devil situation where SPAMTON sold his relationships in exchange for success. He sold his love in exchange for value. As soon as he started talking on the phone and his sales went up, all of his friends abandoned him. He lost his relationships. And as soon as he started to form a connection, a relationship with TENNA, his success disappeared. His deal was broken. For some reason, SPAMTON can't have both. It has to be one or the other. The concept of love and wealth being represented by pink and gold becomes much more prominent later, but we'll come back to that. This moment is what drove SPAMTON and TENNA apart, and it's also what ruined both of them. SPAMTON became distrusting and started pushing everyone away in fear of breaking his deal again. Meanwhile, TENNA became insecure, desperate for attention. His biggest fear is to be thrown away, to be alone, to be abandoned again. After that, TENNA would harass his workers to find this Mike he heard so much about, but no one could ever find him. Pettet mentions that TENNA would get moody if Mike wasn't around. This is because TENNA knows. TENNA saw firsthand what Mike's help did to SPAMTON. He wanted to prove to SPAMTON that he didn't need his help to make it big. Same way SPAMTON wanted to prove to Mike he didn't need help to make it big either. After that, the three Mikes started pretending to be Mike to appease TENNA, and that was that. Speaking of SPAMTON though, SPAMTON has an interesting character trait, being that he loves to copy people. His suit and colored glasses are an attempt to copy Swatch, as directly called out in his dialogue. He stole Mataton's dream body. His red suit from his Big Shot era is stolen from TENNA. Hell, even his speech quirk of speaking with brackets could be him trying to replicate TENNA's speech by, trying to embed messages, but he can't because the hyperlink gets blocked. I'll touch on that later with more detail, but for now I want to focus on the way he steals leitmotifs in his music. Hey Every uses the same motif as Mr. Antenna's TV time. Also notice how in the intro graphic there are two TENNAs at the title for no reason. Is the smaller one where SPAMTON was supposed to be before TENNA had to edit him out? Even years after not being partners anymore, SPAMTON is still using TV Time's theme song. All of his themes have a slight variation of its TV time. Big Shot uses Dummy and the Power of Neo because guess what? SPAMTON is stealing Metaton's dream body and the music reflects that. That everyone knows, sure, but you know what other leitmotifs SPAMTON is blatantly stealing? Cat Swing, Mike's theme. On a first playthrough, it may seem like Cat Swing is referencing SPAMTON, which could be the case, but I believe it's the other way around. SPAMTON's known to steal and copy things from people. It makes more sense that his theme isn't even his at all. Even the ending riff from Cat Swing, when on SPAMTON's theme, it's all glitched, like SPAMTON doesn't even remember that ending part. Speaking of things that SPAMTON steals, let's talk about the pink and gold glasses real quick. Pink and gold, to my belief, is connected to love and value. Now, we established that Mike was a sort of source of luck for SPAMTON, that he suddenly lost and got desperate to try and grab back. SPAMTON wearing the pink and yellow glasses could indicate he's trying to copy Mike's look as a good luck charm. And guess what? It works. The dealmaker greatly increases money gained and something else. Love, perhaps? SPAMTON does take a prominent role in the start of the Weird route. You know, the one with several uncomfortable romantic connotations between KRIS and Noelle. The one where you kill darkness to get stronger, similar to how you kill monsters to gain love in Undertale. If the assumption we made earlier that SPAMTON sold his love in exchange for value, it makes sense why his relationship to love is so twisted. SPAMTON doesn't know love anymore. He feels this need to twist it into this weird and uncomfortable thing. When Gerson is describing the Lord of the Hammer chapters, which is based on the prophecy, therefore directly paralleling Deltarune, he mentions that chapter 5 has a field of pink and gold, and gold, and gold. This, along with a hidden prophecy panel, implying Asgore will play a huge role in the next chapter, seems to draw a connection between Asgore and this concept of pink and gold already associated with Friend. But why? Asgore's philosophy is that flowers are meant to be given out of love and not sold for money. That's why his business is failing. Stop giving away flowers, start selling them. He's struggling with a divorce and his business is not making any money. If only there was someone who could, I don't know, turn his luck around. A friend of some kind. I'm just fucking around. But seriously though, what the fuck is up with Asgore? Asgore is investigating Des's disappearance, and I'm very sure of that. We know he has seen something that other people do not believe him about, and that he's trying to prove. He's got a black shard. That's weird. The black shard is obtained from the knight, who I personally believe is Des. But even if you don't think the knight is Des, they do have antlers, which at least connects them to the Holiday family, therefore it connects to Des either way, so be nice in the comments please. We know Carol is funding Asgore's you-know-what, so to me it only makes sense that Asgore partially saw what happened to December, and he's been obsessed trying to crack the case. We see a bunch of conspiracy boards and papers on the back of his shop, as well as Carol's room where Asgore was. Now, if KRIS is related to Des's disappearance, which I'll argue they are, but that's later, no wonder that in the mic room, of all places, is where the game tells us that KRIS does not like looking at conspiracy boards. It's almost as if their father is investigating a case that involves the real Mike luring December into... I need to calm down. But okay, what am I getting at here? Why am I talking about Asgore? Well, that's all to say that Asgore is going to get a lot of focus on Chapter 5, possibly being the main boss character, as seen as he's labeled as such in the files of the game, along with the prophecies of Queen and TENNA. And given the most defining trait of the Lord of the Hammer description is a field of pink and gold, it's not unreasonable to assume Friend will also play a huge role. That's what all of this info I've been presenting thus far has been leading up to. And again, reminder, Friend was shown in a mandatory cutscene, so if he turns out to not be important, that's just going to be a little weird, you know? I don't know. The Tale of Hell prophecy possibly gives a hint on what led Des to disappear. The children who followed the pointed tail being Des and KRIS. Noelle said that they used to explore the forest behind the graveyard, which is very close to where the shelter is, where the forest would grow. The Shadow Mantle battle happens inside of the shelter, where you can see Friend. This connects Friend to the shelter, therefore to Des's disappearance. Hey, I'm editing this video right now. I realize I never explained why I think KRIS and Des specifically were involved in the disappearance and not anybody else. The reason I think that is because Carol, for some reason, has some weird obsession with KRIS and the soul. And since I don't think anyone else knows what happens to Des, I feel like it's reasonable to assume that KRIS played a role in that. And whatever promise KRIS has with Carol has to do with what happened that day. So that's why I think that KRIS is somehow involved. The details we can't know, obviously, but that's just what I think. The pointed tail is connected to the eggs, as it's mentioned directly outside the egg room in Chapter 4. It may sound like I'm just listing things at this point, but all of this was much needed context for what I'm about to talk next. The egg. As we've covered in the PETTERZ pages of Noelle's blogs, Friend is connected to the eggs, therefore connected to the Forgotten Man somehow. But why? Well, I think Des's disappearance is the reason, which leads me to my next point. I know, weird subject to talk about in a mic video, but I beg you to hear me out. I swear it's related. The egg room in Chapter 3 felt different. Out of place compared to the others. It felt like it was trying to say something, and I think I know what that may be. When entering the room, KRIS is in their Light World outfit, and we see a bunch of colored aces that KRIS had copied as a child in order to cheat at a game of cards. Here we also find the Forgotten Man, the man that's been giving you the mysterious eggs this whole time, who claims he can only speak in this very island, which too will disappear soon. He goes on a long story that admittedly doesn't make any sense, and even he acknowledges that, saying he can't even understand himself. Now here's my explanation for what's going on here. The Forgotten Man is made up. We never see the man. Even when the dialogue says there's not a man here, you can still feel his hitbox for some reason. He's stuck in this weird confusing state of existing and not existing. Something Schrodinger's cat, I don't know, I just wanted to reference a cat again. Not too important, not too unimportant. He's constantly contradicting himself. Even when he's telling him his story, he's not convinced of it himself. His story is contradictory and confused, like a child making up a lie. If we're going off of the assumption that the Forgotten Man and the tree are a way for KRIS to repress that memory, the man's dialogue about how KRIS has forgotten him many times before makes a lot more sense. KRIS is trying to forget. KRIS doesn't want to remember. We can only talk to the Forgotten Man on the Forgotten Island. where we also see Rudens that KRIS had copied to cheat in a cards game. The man can only speak when he's at an island made to represent KRIS's lies. And it doesn't stop there. In both chapters 3 and 4, there's a weird emphasis on cheating and lying when accessing the egg rooms. On chapter 3, you have to admit to the Zapper that you're a cheater and are headed nowhere in life. In chapter 4, if you miss the egg room in the second sanctuary, you can make it back there on a third one by talking to a secret organic, and he'll say,
Liar! Your heads are shining. You took and made. Tickets and cards drawn in grey, a trace. Repeat it, it's all so clear. Though, it would be a lie if I said I understood it. We are all liars now. Yes, it's fun being a liar.
There it is again, the egg room being tied to KRIS lying. Things get even more interesting in chapter 4 as egg room though. When wandering around, you can find the man in darkness. He points to something and nods. Kristen finds a canvas and tried to sketch what they had seen behind the tree. They tried to draw what happened in the forest that day, but they couldn't do it. No matter how many times KRIS kept drawing lines, they drifted away and erred. KRIS kept trying over and over until the canvas was nothing but a huge monochrome smear. Until finally, they just painted a tree on top of everything, leaving nothing but a simple, still life. This moment is KRIS repressing the memory, refusing to describe what happened. If KRIS convinced themselves that it was all out of view, behind that tree, they could continue to live life as if nothing happened. After painting, KRIS can head over to the sink nearby and wash their hands, but there's still some bits of graphite between their fingers that doesn't come off. You can never wash it all away. Now, my theory is pretty much over at this point, but I still have a few disconnected points that I wanted to include that I didn't know how to fit into the video, so we'll go over that now. One of those points is another connection between the egg room and Des disappearing. The egg room in chapter 3 had a weird quirk on the release of the game. Once you finished the sword route and got the shadow mantle, a place where friend shows up by the way, you suddenly were locked out of getting the egg, because the characters were all used up, which meant you couldn't use them on the room with the bibliox. But that was changed. Now, if you go to that room after doing the sword route, the bibliox will mumble about how the characters are gone, and how the ticket is under the ball machine. The ball machine, the most RNG-based thing in the entire game, the one where donating more points increases your gold chance, the one where inputting 1225, a literal December holiday, sends you to an out-of-bounds room where finder.ogg is playing in the background, leading to another ball machine that dispenses a black triangle that slips through KRIS's non-existent hand, allowing you to finally get the trip ticket that takes you to the egg room. This weird secret directly tied to Des is what allows you to reach the egg after having done the sword route, one of the few instances where friend shows up directly. Why are these connected? If not for this theory, I don't know what it is.
Well, if the mic room is so important, how come Toby implemented it so late in development? Also, what's up with cat petters? Why is that important?
Well, my dear viewer with this especially cartoony voice, the SPAMTON sweepstakes has a lot of references to cat petters through Noah's blogs, like, a lot. So it's strange that we didn't really see much of that in-game, outside of that one secret room in chapter 4 that we know was implemented somewhat late in development. Some people saw this as evidence that Mike isn't important because otherwise Toby wouldn't have added it so late in development, which felt like last-minute additions. But it's almost as if there were going to be another chapter that was meant to be released at the same time, and because it got delayed, suddenly all the cat petters references didn't lead anywhere, and so Toby had to quickly add something cat petters related at the end of chapter 4 to make up for the foreshadowing that was referencing the chapter that wasn't coming out yet. Or something! Friend and the Knight share a laugh sound effect. I have no idea what this means. I guess maybe since they're both from the shelter. I don't know, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm a little stumped.
Well, if Mike is friend, then who's this?
Well, that's David. His name is David. Anyway, I'm done here. Bye.